Hello.
Hello. Give it a few more minutes for folks to join. As folks are joining, feel free to put your attendance in the meeting list. All right, I guess we can get started here. Probably be a quick one because I think most of the feedback has been regarding some of the GitHub stuff. But just as a reminder, this meeting is being recorded. It'll be uploaded to YouTube shortly after. And your participation in this meeting is an agreement to abide by the OpenSSF Code of Conduct. All right. So the only thing I had on the agenda was just, going over open source Summit North America feedback, specifically around like the stuff we heard about some of the tooling coming out of SLSA. But if anybody else had any other agenda items they wanted to add, feel free to add it on there as well. So I'll just go quickly and then I'll open it up to the floor. So most of the feedback got on SLSA, the SLSA 1.0 stuff was really good. The stuff, there's a lot of different things about the spec and some things that can maybe be clarified or additional examples and that kind of a thing. But there were a couple of clear things from the tooling perspective that we probably wanted to start to take a look at. One was one of the big pieces of feedback was, hey, I started looking at this thing. There's this big push for 1.0. There's this new V1 spec, but all the GitHub workflows seem to still be using V0.2 of the spec. And what's the sort of status of moving on to V1? And so we don't have any of the folks on right now who tend to, because I think it's mostly the Googlers who've been working on that side of thing. But I can definitely reach back out to them, see if there's if there's any updates, anything that they're working on that end. Because yeah, I think I know one of the big things is like, hey, we're doing all this stuff with 1.0. If we don't have, if folks are not using V1 of the spec, like how, like, what's that sort of journey look like? How do we make sure that we also don't confuse people? Because people might look at, oh, it's V0.2 of the spec. That means they're not using V1 of the requirements, and that might not be the actual case. We want to make sure that we can sort of clear up some of that confusion, and if we can get V1 support sooner rather than later, it would be great. And then the second piece was a lot of folks were asking for something along the lines of, test examples of sorts of attacks, the SLSA could prevent to help with testing of SLSA tooling. So this was something like some folks were saying, hey, I think I built something that is SLSA conformant. I'm not sure. And I don't know how to actually, like, what sorts of attacks could, what is an example attack that somebody could run against this build system that this should detect, prevent, yada, yada, provide, we'd have the data around. So that was another thing that folks there were asking about. Cool. Thoughts? Anything else from Open Source Summit from the tooling side of things that folks wanted to bring up?
Not exactly, but it reminds me that we need to update the Get Started page on SLSA that says Fresca is SLSA 2.
You mean SLSA 3? Yeah.
Yeah, right now it says it's 2.
Yeah, yes. We got to update that. I will add that to my list of things to do for today. Cool. If there's nothing else on the open source North America side, what other agenda items did folks have regarding SLSA tooling? As as a reminder, we're open to whatever open source SLSA tooling folks have been building. If folks have questions around integrating the tooling or using the tooling or generating new tooling, this is the place for it. Cool. And if there's nothing else, we can end early.
If I may take the risk of asking a question.
Sure. No.
So say I have a SLSA tool that creates a provenance for the build track and maybe another tool in the future that for other tracks or whatever. I create evidence and I sign them, and I'm able to bring SLSA 2 at least by doing that, right? But now I need the build system to basically create this for me. So in GitHub, you have an action, and if I understand correctly, the trust comes from like a reusable workflow kind of trick. So I'm asking if that is like what's going to happen across like all the other services, the build systems. It's going to be like extendable by any action, any SLSA tool, or is it going to be like only the Salsa official tools?
Oh, no. Anybody can, so we're building a conformance program. So if you publicly state that your tool is Salsa conformant, the idea would be you would provide either a self-attestation or you would provide proof via an auditor that said, yep, I looked at their build system and I believe it to be, doing those, doing those things, and like with some human readable like content as to why, right? Because even with the GitHub actions, right? If, for example, GitHub itself was not doing the right things, it wouldn't matter that there's a workflow, a reusable workflow, right? Like that the trust doesn't come for that reusable workflow. The trust comes from a couple of places. One is that the GitHub like actions platform, right, is doing largely the right things from a security perspective. And then secondarily, in order to prevent, right, like because the workflow is needed because people are the workflow is needed because GitHub itself does not have built-in sort of Salsa support. Like if GitHub as the actions platform had built-in Salsa support that when you run a build, it automatically, injects Salsa provenance, that would be good enough as well. The problem that we have, right, is if we have a GitHub action, the GitHub action is user definable, and that makes it, not a good fit for Salsa. But the workflow, the reusable workflow, is something that can be like, it's sort of set in stone. Like you could go back and say, hey, this specific code led to this specific thing, and it could be audited and all that great stuff. And it provides us a few other things in there to say that, yeah, the end user workflow, the end user action can't mess with the reusable workflow. So you get that as well. And once again, this is based on assuming GitHub itself is doing the right things. Like if for some reason it's discovered that the GitHub action can mess with the reusable workflow, then it all falls apart. We don't believe that to be the case. But in the future, we imagine with a conformance program, GitHub would go and say, yep, we're going to, make a couple of assertions, or, we're going to make a couple of, we're going to self-attest or whatever, that we've done all the right things here. And here's why we want you to believe that, some information there, or maybe they get a third-party auditor to do it. And so all that'll go through. And then assuming that's all good, then, and you accept that, then, that's kind of Salsa. And so when it comes to other folks, whether it's a build platform like Fresca, or, some other build platform you're building or whatever, you would pretty much just need to provide information to the end user to, so that they can kind of say, yep, I believe you, or I don't believe you, whether it's just, hey, we went through an audit with this company and this company is saying they're good, or it's I self-attested that, my build tool is Salsa, conformant, something like that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. I'll try to phrase this the question a bit differently. Say I want to have my own tool creating evidence that is not Salsa. Okay, it's not connected to Salsa, but I want the same trust level that Salsa gives by defining that the build system needs to create this piece of evidence, and it's not affected by the builder, the producer of the software. And in GitHub, I say it's a trick because it allows me to basically put in my own action into the same place you would put like the Salsa provenance. I could put my own action. It could be another provenance creator, but for Salsa, but it also can be anything else on my mind, at least in my view.
Yep.
But like in other build systems, I'm not sure it's going to be like that. For example, in Fresca, I guess you're going to like hard code the Salsa provenance into your build system. It's not going to be extendable. It's a question. I'm not asked. I don't actually know, but.
So I mean, Fresca is based on Tecton, and so we are somewhat bound by what is coming in from upstream. So if Tecton chain supports a new version of Salsa or supports a new provenance format or whatever, we can definitely use that as well. There is, you know, in addition to that, right, there is discussion in the Tecton side to say, can we make that user definable? Can we say that, and by user definable, like I would say, not, maybe that's a bad word, like build platform owner definable, like the person who's actually running the build platform, whether it, you know, in this case, Fresca is an open source tool. There's discussion among the Tecton folks about making some certain things like Salsa user definable. If I understand your question correctly, where, you know, folks might not want Salsa provenance, they want something else, but they still want to follow that same sort of pattern where, you know, you have a thing, this thing sort of generates some sort of security metadata. Yeah, that's something that I know Tecton is looking at, and a lot of the other tools are starting to look at as well. You know, something like making, you know, whether it's Salsa or similar, make something that is like a something like reusable workflows or similar of like, hey, this is like a plugin system into some of these tools. So you might have something like a Salsa plugin, for example, for Jenkins that wraps your pipelines in a bunch of stuff. And then you could take that same sort of plugin and change it up. And now it's, you know, an Acme, you know, company metadata, you know, security metadata X that does something slightly different.
Well, yeah, that sounds awesome.
Yeah. Cool. Any other questions, agenda items? Things folks wanted to bring up regarding tooling? A quick update on some of the Spectre stuff I've been working on. So, you know, Spectre supports Salsa v1 right now. It supports SPDX 2.2 and 2.3, and it allows generation of JSON schemas and ingestion of JSON schemas into stuff for validating, you know, validating some of these supply chain metadata documents. Planning to support, well, it supports also in Toto, just the general in Toto spec. We plan to support a couple of the other sort of things like the VSA and some of that, and we plan to also support Dizzy soon with the ability to, you know, via SigStore verify signatures and that sort of thing. But yeah, if there's nothing else, we can give folks back 40 minutes or so. All right, I'll see you all next week.
All right, thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thanks.